Anna had always carried more weight on her shoulders than her fragile frame seemed built for. Not because she was weak, but because the world had. The days after Jackson handed Anna the title to his land were unlike anything she had ever lived before. For the girl who once bent her back alone in the fields now woke to the sight of men working under her direction, cattle grazing across pastures that stretched to the horizon, and a home no longer filled with silence but with purpose. Yet despite the change in fortune, Anna's heart struggled to accept what had happened. For every time she walked through town, eyes followed her with disbelief, some filled with envy, others with scorn, as though they could not stand that the woman they had once mocked now carried herself with quiet dignity. Jackson remained by her side, not just as a benefactor but as a partner, listening to her ideas about managing the ranch, teaching her the subtle art of cattle breeding, and trusting her judgment in matters most men would never entrust to a woman. But beneath this harmony, a storm brewed quietly, for there were men in that county who wanted nothing more than to see Jackson fall, and Anna's sudden rise made her a target of their bitterness. The local banker, who had nearly tasted victory when Anna's land was on the verge of foreclosure, now seethed with rage, determined to find a way to strip her of what had been given. And among the ranchers, there were whispers that Jackson's generosity was foolishness, that no man should hand his land to a woman who had been branded a debtor and a burden. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the sky in fiery shades of orange, Anna stood by the corral watching the horses when Jackson approached. His hat tilted low, his eyes shadowed not by the setting sun but by thoughts he carried heavy on his shoulders. He told her plainly that she had to be ready, that wealth and land did not come without enemies, that the same people who once pitied her would now conspire against her. Anna listened, her fingers brushing the weathered wood of the fence, and though fear trembled within her, something stronger rose to the surface, resolve. For the first time, she no longer felt like the helpless girl drowning in debt. She felt like a woman with something worth protecting. Days turned into weeks, and Anna proved her worth not just in heart, but in action. Waking before dawn, riding the fields with Jackson, learning the rhythm of ranch life, until she no longer needed guidance but commanded respect from the very cowhands who had doubted her. And when drought threatened the land, it was Anna who suggested a new irrigation plan, saving the crops and proving to Jackson and to herself that she was not merely the keeper of his gift, but a rightful steward of the legacy entrusted to her. But fate is never content to let peace settle too long, and trouble arrived on the hooves of strangers, men hired by the banker, men who rode into their land with greed in their eyes and violence in their hearts, threatening not just the ranch but the fragile bond between Anna and Jackson. That night, as Anna stood in the doorway watching flames flicker in the distance where a barn had been set ablaze, she felt the weight of her past pressing against the present, reminding her of how easily everything could be taken. Yet Jackson's hand found hers, steady and strong, and in his voice she heard not fear but faith. "They can burn wood and steal cattle, Anna, but they cannot break what we've built together." Tears blurred her vision, not of weakness but of gratitude, for in that moment she realized that the gift Jackson had given her was not just land or freedom from debt. It was belief. Belief in her worth, belief in their future. So to all of you listening, remember this truth as Anna's story deepens. Life may drag you through the fire, people may whisper against you, and enemies may rise when blessings arrive. But strength is not in what you own, it is in who stands beside you and what you dare to fight for. And if these stories touch your heart, reminding you that resilience and love shine brightest when darkness closes in, then don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because the journey of Anna and Jackson is far from over, and you will not want to miss how the woman, once called a burden, becomes the very foundation of a legacy, stronger than steel, branded her as such. When her father died, he left her with nothing but acres of dry land drowning in debt, and a town full of people who looked at her with pity and scorn. Every time she walked into the general store, whispers followed her like shadows. "She's a burden," they said. A girl drowning in debt, living off scraps of what her father left behind. Suitors never came near, friends disappeared, and even neighbors closed their doors, afraid her misfortune might spill into their homes. Anna tried, God, she tried, working the land alone, sowing seeds with blistered hands, selling what little she could, but the debts piled higher than her courage could climb. At night, she lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling, praying for a miracle while convincing herself miracles no longer belonged to women like her. And just when the walls of despair seemed ready to close in, fate sent her an unlikely answer in the form of a man everyone in town spoke of in equal parts awe and envy. Jackson Hale, the rich cowboy whose ranch stretched further than the eye could see, whose herds filled valleys, whose boots carried the dust of triumph. He had no reason to notice her, no reason to stop his wagon at her broken fence one summer evening. And yet he did. At first she thought it a cruel joke. Why would a man with more land than anyone, more wealth than half the county combined, pause for a woman like her? But Jackson had eyes that looked past appearances, past gossip, past numbers scrawled in ledgers. He saw a woman fighting battles no one helped her fight, a woman bending beneath debt but never snapping, a woman whose worth was hidden under the dust of hardship. They spoke little that evening, only a few words about weather, crops, and the kind of silence that spoke more than words could. Jackson left, but something in Anna's heart shifted, a faint spark she dared not call hope. Days later he returned, not with pity but with presence, lending his hand with fences, sharing advice on cattle, treating her not as a burden but as an equal. The town noticed and tongues wagged, whispering that the rich cowboy was wasting his time on the indebted girl. But Jackson never listened to gossip. He measured people by grit, not gold, and Anna, though cautious, began to trust the sincerity in his steady voice and the respect in his steady gaze. The turning point came one autumn morning, when the sheriff rode up with another notice. Her land would be taken, her father's name buried under foreclosure. The paper trembled in Anna's hand as shame burned her eyes. The crowd that gathered to watch did not hide their smugness. We knew she couldn't last, they murmured. But before despair swallowed her whole, Jackson stepped forward, pulling from his saddlebag a folded parchment, heavy with ink and seals. He pressed it into her hands before everyone's eyes and spoke words that silenced the square. "This is yours now." She unfolded it with shaking fingers, staring in disbelief at the title deed to his land, vast and sprawling, wealth enough to erase her debts 10 times over. The crowd gasped, the sheriff stuttered, and Anna fell to her knees. Not from weakness, but from the overwhelming realization that someone had not only seen her worth, but invested his very legacy in it. Jackson knelt beside her, lifting her chin so she would see his eyes as he said, "You are no burden. Anna, you are the reason a man like me built all this, to share it with someone who knows its value." And in that moment, the woman the town had called worthless became the owner of more than land. She became the keeper of a cowboy's heart.